was 4:03 in the morning and I woke up screaming. It was my dream. In my dream, I watched everyone I ever knew or loved be killed by the creature. It had a short, fat body and long, slender arms, which ended with claws that looked more like swords than claws. Its eyes were slits that glowed red in the darkness, and its teeth were long and sharp like steak knives. It looked at me before it killed them and laughed each time before it ripped apart my loved ones with its sharp claws. How had it found us? It tricked me into letting it into my home by mimicking the voice of my father. It couldn't come in without permission. It told me after it ripped out my mother's heart. The dream ended with the creature laughing its evil cackle and slowly walking towards me. Dragging its claws on the floor, I screamed and sat up. I was in my room, in my bed, safe again. 4:03, I hear a knock at the door. I froze up instantly. "Tommy, I heard you screaming. Are you all right?" I heard my mother say. "What a relief. Mom's here. I'm fine, Mom. Just a bad dream," I replied, the relief washing over me. "Okay, honey, I got you a glass of water. Do you want it?" Mom said back to me. "Sure, come in," I said, and as those words left my mouth, I remembered that it was September, and I had moved back into my college dorm 3 weeks ago. Story 2. I used to babysit in my teenage years. When I was 14, I babysat for a 6-year-old boy named Cody. Once his parent left me with a few instructions, mainly to order a pizza for dinner and not let him go in their room. They also mentioned that Cody tended to act differently than other kids, often talking to himself or his imaginary friends, especially when playing with his toys. It was midday, pouring outside. I was watching an old Wipeout show that used to be on TV in the early 2000s. Cody was on the floor, playing with his toys scattered across the living room. He kept using the name Agnes, acting like he was playing with another kid sitting in front of him. Then, one of his toys, a little cube-like thing with a crank, activated out of nowhere. It was the kind of toy that would take effort to activate, but there it was, moving on its own. I asked Cody how that was possible, and he looked at me saying, "Agnes is playing with it." It was a little disturbing to hear him say that. I picked up the toy and turned it off. In the final hour, waiting for his parents to come back, I was in the bathroom washing up when there was a knock at the door. "Cody," I said. Cody wasn't there. I turned off the bathroom lights and walked into the room, expecting to see Cody playing around trying to scare me. Instead, Cody was sitting on the bed in the far corner of the room, looking at me. I asked him who just pushed open the door, and he said, "Agnes." Now truly freaked out, I picked Cody up off the bed and brought him to the living room, where I spent the rest of my shift until his parents came back. I didn't mention any of the weird things that happened, but when they reached out to me to watch Cody again a few weeks later, I never called them back. Story 3. I was just 10 years old when the incident occurred. My parents were divorced, and it was one of those rare occasions when we planned to spend the holiday season together. Thanksgiving was approaching, and I was filled with excitement at the thought of seeing my dad. He used to work in Atlanta while I stayed with my mom in Austin, so these reunions were always special. But fate had something else in store for us that day, something that would forever etch itself into my memory. Our flight was unexpectedly delayed, leaving us stranded at the airport for hours. Frustrated by the situation, my mom decided to smoke one. She took me to a bookstore and instructed me to stay within her line of sight and call her if I needed anything. I immediately ran to the thriller section, as it was my favorite genre at the time. As I looked at the titles, my eyes suddenly caught sight of a peculiar figure. It was a man wearing a mask and hat, his face completely hidden. I remember thinking that the long black coat he wore made him look like a Dementor. I felt very uncomfortable by how near he stood, but I dismissed it, assuming the man just wanted to browse the titles I was looking at. After all, the books in this section were typically meant for adults. I decided to move to the next aisle, which housed romance novels. To my astonishment, the masked man followed me, pretending to be interested in the books on the shelf opposite to mine. His behavior sent chills down my spine, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly amiss. Seeking confirmation, I now went into the kids section, where Dr. Seuss waited. To my alarm, the man followed me there as well, his presence growing more unsettling by the second. He was not even trying to hide it now. My heart pounded in my chest as I feared the worst. Desperate to escape this stranger, I quickly returned to the thriller section and grabbed a book, pretending to be interested in buying it. The man, however, continued to shadow my every move and followed me back there. I panicked and began to make my way back to where my mom was waiting. To my relief, I found my mother already halfway there. I recounted my experience, telling her about the man who had trailed me from aisle to aisle. She told me that she had seen him do that from where she stood outside the store, and that's why she came to get me. We didn't linger there any longer. My mom paid for my chosen book, and we left the store together. As we walked, I couldn't resist glancing behind us, only to find that the masked man was still following, unaffected by the fact that I now had an adult with me now. What did he want from us? I told my mom, and she urged me not to look, saying that we were about to board the plane anyway. She was right. We lost the man when we boarded the plane. When we were ready to take off, I glanced around. My blood ran cold as I spotted the masked man, seated just a few rows behind us. Did he know we would be on this flight? Was that the reason he was following us? My heart raced as I whispered to my mom, informing her of the man's presence. She urged me to remain calm, promising me that we would find a way to deal with the situation. 3 agonizing hours later, we landed in Atlanta. Being in a different state didn't stop the masked man from following us. My mom took me straight to a gift shop there, and I chose a present for my dad while she kept a watchful eye. The man stayed right outside the entrance, waiting for us. It didn't look like he was about to give up. My mom decided enough was enough. As soon as we left the gift shop, she made her way towards airport security, raising her voice enough for everyone to hear. She told them how this man had been stalking us from before we even boarded the flight to Atlanta. The masked guy must have heard her, for he immediately bolted before security could make their way to him. In the end, he vanished into the crowd, leaving us shaken but grateful to have escaped any potential harm. When I recalled this incident as an adult, I realized that we could have easily become his victims had we not noticed him following us.